want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, goes on the end zone. Caught ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
We don't even keep score. We just run that up and leave.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up the middle. Heads intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 29, 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Ladies and gentlemen, the return of the greatest uniform in NFL history is upon us. That is right. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers will wear their beloved throwback creamsicle uniforms in Week 6 against the Detroit Lions. The first time in over a decade the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have had the opportunity to wear their beloved creamsicle uniforms. And we have got a lot to catch you guys up on coming off of the bye week. Headed into Week 6 against an age-old NFC Central rival. A rivalry reborn is what they are calling it, and we are getting ready here as we kick off Creamsicle Week on the Cannon Fire Podcast. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, live on YouTube today. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, the man himself, Evan Wanish. How you doing, my friend? I was going to say the Philly Bucs fan himself, but for some reason, it slipped my mind. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting on Sunday to see the creamsicles finally back in action. So it's been a long time, and yeah, it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and obviously today we're going to open things up with some injury news, something that not a lot of people were talking about headed into the bye week. Well, I mean, I say that kind of passive-aggressively. Everybody was talking about how the bye week came at a good time for this Bucs team to get everyone healthy, because staying consistent and staying healthy was an issue for them in 2022, even in 2021 when they had a stacked roster, and now they're dealing with a much younger roster, a lot less depth than they had before. But luckily for the Bucs coming off of the bye week, not only do they get the chance to heal up some of their starters, guys like Mike Evans and Vita Vea, but you get Jamel Dean back, and you also get some rookies that you haven't seen too much of this season in Kalijah Kancey, Buccaneers first-round pick, and other rookie Servassier Dennis. So a couple of names the Bucs are going to be happy to see back at practice this week. Also back at practice this week, in the theme of things, the creamsicle helmets, which look fantastic. But let's talk about some of those players coming back and the impact of guys like Kalijah Kancey, Servassier Dennis, and more back on this Bucs roster for Week 6.
Yeah, I think especially Kancey, and I know a lot of fans are eager to see it. The fans are, I think, growing a little bit frustrated that he's not out there, and I get it. At the same time, though, I look at it, and I've said it on this show, I thought that the Bucs sort of rushed him Week 1 to get out there. This is a guy who didn't play at all in the preseason, didn't really do any training camp. It was very early in training camp that he got injured, so I just thought that, okay, he didn't really practice much. Then the game week rolls around and he's practicing a little bit, and all of a sudden he's playing. And I thought it was a risk that they didn't really need to take, and the risk didn't pay off. And he ended up, getting re-injured. So I think the Bucs wanted to be as cautious as possible, because you don't want to send him back out there and then him getting re-hurt again. And then it maybe is a long-term thing. Maybe he's out for the year. Maybe he's out for longer than 4 or 5 games. You don't want that to affect. I mean, this is still a very young guy who has a whole, development to go. So, and he's an important piece for the Buccaneers, present and future. So I think they wanted to be cautious. I get fans' frustration because you want to see him out there, but it always felt to me like this, after the bye week and everything, this felt like a more realistic date than, say, I know some people wanted him for the Saints game and it didn't happen, but that does feel a little bit more realistic that we get Kalijah Kancey back. And also, I think a pretty cool touch that they're wearing the creamsicle helmets in practice. I don't know if maybe there's a strategic thing behind it. I don't know. Maybe if the coaches want to get them to get used to it, or how it looks and stuff like that. I don't know, or if they just felt like wearing them. So, but yeah, a pretty cool touch regardless, which I don't think they've ever done. I don't believe. People can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe before the creamsicle games in the past, the throwback games, that they've ever done that. But yeah, I mean, get Canty back out there would be pretty massive, especially because this team, as we saw last time they were out there, the pass rush, I think, has lacked a little bit of juice from time to time. And I think they could really use that, especially against a Detroit team that is playing fantastic football right now. So it's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, only 11 snaps for Kalijah Kancey in that week 1 game against Minnesota. But even though he played, 11 snaps, he still recorded a QB hit off of a stunt. So not only is he an extra guy for that rotation along that defensive line, but he's an extra guy for Todd Bowles to scheme around. And it's going to be interesting to see if he adds another layer of what this Bucs pass rush can try and do, because obviously this is a coaching staff that is aware of the adjustments they have to make week in and week out. And I have enough confidence that Todd Bowles, as a defensive coordinator, or at least as a guy running the defense as a head coach, he has more than enough experience to realize what needs to be done, because this defense is still, after all these years, kept in tip-top shape when they're healthy. So it's going to be interesting to see what he brings to the table. SirVocea Dennis very much a part of that conversation as well. Getting healthy back in the secondary is another thing I wanted to talk to you about. We'll probably go into more detail in the game preview this week, but Jared Goff has been playing some of his best football for the Lions. He has been really slinging the rock around. He has been efficient, and even though Amon-Ra St. Brown has been battling injury, it has been an effective passing attack for the Lions so far this year. As you mentioned, they're playing great football. So when you look at getting guys back in the rotation like Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean finally back at practice, Zion McCollum been playing well. Have to give him his props as well up to this point of the season. D. Delaney up on top of some of the passing categories as far as cornerbacks grading out with the rest of the NFL. So he's playing well. Can't say enough things about Christian Izzy and the undrafted free agent. So these guys are getting healthy and they're finally getting on a roll, if you will. I know they're coming off of the bye week, so maybe there's going to be some adjustments early in the game. But for the most part, getting a lot of these guys back healthy is huge.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And, especially in the secondary, because, we looked at it and Ryan Neal exited that Saints game early with a concussion, was ruled out pretty much immediately. If they played a week 5 game, Ryan Neal probably isn't playing in that game. Because he probably is not going to be able to pass concussion protocol. Now with the bye week, he was probably able to go. Jamel Dean, another week of rest for Dean after missing week 4. He went in week 3, got hurt, and came back in, got hurt again. So it's nice to get him to rest up. Carlton Davis, who is obviously not 100%. Vita Vea, who's not 100%. Devin White, who's not 100%. Just so many guys, particularly on the defensive side of the football, that are hopefully, that's what you're hoping. We don't know this for sure. We're kind of assuming, right? Because with the extra rest, you're hoping that and assuming that they're going to be healthier. They're probably not going to be 100% still, because you rarely are during a football season. Especially the more games you play. But hopefully, this can re-energize them a little bit, because it was a pro having the week 5 bye week when they did because of the injuries and how banged up. The con is that now they play 13 straight games. So there is no more breaks. You get a little mini bye. After you play Buffalo on Thursday Night Football, you'll get about 10 days off before your next game. But that's a little mini bye week to sort of rest up. But it's going to be a gauntlet from here on out. So that's a con of that. And I didn't love when the schedule came out. I never, and I've explained this actually on a Mr. Bucks Nation video, that when you look at the schedule and you look at a bye week, I always prefer it to be week 7 in the week 7 to week 9, week 7, 8, 9. I think it's sort of perfect right in the middle of the season. I think it's a nice, sort of like refresher. You get to calm down. You sort of get to tell exactly what your team is, because right now Bucks are 3-1. We don't know exactly what type of team they are. Right. I think you can't make that assumption after 4 games, but I do think it's very good that the defense particularly can get healthy, because the offense is fairly healthy. I mean, I know Mike Evans, and I'm curious to see if he can play because he was ruled out with the hamstring. A lot of times if he has hamstring issues, he'll be able to come back in. This time he wasn't. I don't know if that was the Bucs being cautious or if it's a little bit of a worse hamstring. Who knows? But really, that's the only question mark, I think, for the offense is Mike Evans. Obviously, it is a big question mark, especially against a Detroit team, which has been playing great football. So you're going to need Mike Evans out there for sure.
Yeah, Mike Evans always been a guy who almost prides himself on just being available. We've said before on this team, availability is the best ability, and Mike Evans being one of the most productive guys on the offense has been a staple of that for a long time. The model of consistency, all these 1,000-yard seasons, and he's well on his way to another one so far this year. Phones are on, by the way, tonight as we are live on YouTube. Give us a call, 305-224-1968. The meeting ID on your screen for this week, 878-459-9335. Checking in on the live chat, by the way. Shout out to all of our people hanging out. Flowsun, Christopher Cole, Rashad West, Chris Mail, Wesley Ramirez, Richard T. over there on the West Coast, David Arbuckle, and Yurek Mazzino. I hope I pronounced that correctly. We do have a question from Wesley Ramirez, and he says, can we talk about the special teams and how the Bucs could improve? And this is an interesting question that, again, not a lot of people are having, but I did see you covered it recently on a Mr. Bucs Nation video. We can talk about the return game in a second, because I think that may be more so what he's referring to here. But let's talk about the combination of Jake Camarda and Chase McLaughlin, because so far, I mean, this has been a duo that I won't say was unexpected, simply because Jake Camarda had such a class rookie season as one of the better punters in the NFL, that this was expected, right? We knew the kid had a cannon, and he's continuing to play well. But Chase McLaughlin, a couple of 50-plus yarders under his belt in the first few weeks for the Bucs who signed him, needing a kicker with range. So far, this duo has really been doing a lot of great things whenever they're on the field, and that counts because, as we saw in Week 1, the Bucs beat Minnesota 20-17. Those field goals matter.
They matter a lot. And Chase McLaughlin, and I even mentioned that in the video, like Chase McLaughlin nailing that 57-yarder in Minnesota to put the Bucs back up 2 scores. And then he did it again in New Orleans to put the Bucs back up 2 scores. Big kicks by Chase McLaughlin there. And obviously, like I said, I think I said this on the postgame show for the Saints, it helps that they're both indoors, but regardless, he still made the kicks, and they're not gimmies by any means. So, yeah, I thought the special teams have been pretty good. Now, I didn't want to, and even in that video, I wasn't going to get into, well, there's special teams coverage and this and that. No, I was just talking about the punter and the kicker. Like, that's what I was focusing on, and both have been really good for the Bucs, and they've both been like weapons for the Bucs to use, especially, the punter. Obviously, the kicker's pretty straightforward, right? You put the ball through the uprights, and that's a weapon. But being able to a punter to flip the field, to pin offenses deep, that is a weapon. Like that is something that you can use to your advantage that not every team has, and the Bucs haven't had for a little bit. Obviously, friend of the show, Bradley Pinion, he was, I think, a solid punter. I think he got a little bit too much hate, but I do think Jake Camarda is an upgrade over Pinion, and his ability to just bomb the ball sometimes. I mean, when he gets a hold of one, it is special, and he's been really good. And I do think that, I think right now he's probably a top 10 punter, and I think he has the potential. And look, I'm not going to sit here and go punter rankings. I might not even be able to name 10 or 15 punters for you, but I think he has the potential to be year in and year out consistently one of the considered by many the best, one of the best punters in the NFL. I think he has that potential. So a pretty good draft pick by Jason Light. And then also Chase McLaughlin being a free agent pickup who wasn't like a flashy name or anything. It's not like you went out and you signed the big time kicker, for $4 or $5 million. Chase McLaughlin wasn't like some sought after when you looked at, okay, all right, the Bucs need a kicker. Ooh, this guy's here, right? It wasn't really like that. They took a chance on Chase McLaughlin, and so far it's worked out. So he's only missed 1 kick, and that was blocked by the Bears. So technically, I mean, I don't really put that all on the kicker. So he hasn't really missed a kick, knock on wood, obviously. Hopefully it doesn't happen anytime soon, but he's been really good, and it's a credit to this front office for finding both of those guys.
Your thoughts on the return game? Devin Tompkins kind of been the guy shouldering the load so far for the Bucs since he took over last season. And, we've talked time and time again. I feel like this is a conversation we have at least once a year at this point, but there haven't really been any game changers in the backfield for the Bucs, returning punts, returning kickoffs in a decade? I mean, who was the last person back there who legitimately was a threat? Deshaun Jackson, the 3 times they ever put him back there. And then the one time he took one to the house on the punt return against the Steelers in 2018. There hasn't been much of a presence in the kick return game. And unfortunately, the Bucs are not one of those teams where you look at anyone who is lined up at returner for them and said, oh, that guy's a real threat to potentially take one back to the house. I think Devin Tompkins has done better than some of the other returners we've had back there. I remember there was a time in 2020 where we had Kenyon Barner returning punts because who was the guy who was doing it before? I think it was Bobo Wilson for a little bit, and then there was
Jaden Mickens.
Yeah, Jaden
had a couple guys, yeah.
And they throw Kenyon Barner in there. He doesn't work. And then you draft your boy, Jalen Darden, try to get him in there, and he doesn't do very much, if anything. I mean, he was doing more harm than good most games. So I kind of understand where a lot of people are getting frustrated with the lack of production because, these are very important plays. And when you have the other phases of special teams that do play well, with Chase McLaughlin being a very productive field goal kicker so far for Tampa Bay, and then Camarda being a top 10 punter, it gets frustrating. So I totally understand it. But what do you think it's going to take to get a little extra juice back there? Do you think we're kind of rushing here with Devin Tompkins and his ability? I know he's been getting involved in the offense and he'll have a spot on the team, but do you think the Bucs look to address that before the end of the year, or is that just kind of something that's not even on their radar at this point?
I don't know if it's on their radar, honestly. I just don't know how much of an emphasis they're putting on it. It's going to sound strange, but I just don't know if they care that much. I don't know if it's that big of a deal to them. I think the special teams coverage is more of a bigger deal to them than actually, who's the returner, trying to get a Devin Hester type. I don't really think that's a priority. And honestly, some of the rules, the NFL, I do think 5 years from now, I don't know if we are even going to have kickoffs anymore. I think it's just going to be punts pretty much. So I just think they're trying to eliminate it. They're trying to make the game safer and stuff like that. I just think it's going to be whoever gets the ball, whoever wins the toss, you get the ball at the 25. I don't know if we're going to see kickoffs 5 years from now. So I just don't know. Like I said, it sounds weird. I just don't think they care that much. They've made some efforts. Like you said, they've tried a lot of the guys. You just mentioned a bunch of different names there. They've drafted Jalen Darden, traded up to get Jalen Darden. And it just hasn't really worked out. So I don't think they're really too concerned with it. It's not going to be the reason they win or lose football games most of the time. I mean, obviously, if there's a big botched punt or something like that, that's different. But most of the time, the reason they win or lose is not going to be because of Devin Tompkins and his return ability. So I don't think it's that huge of a deal. And, I think you just sort of ride out and see if Tompkins can maybe get a little bit hot. You haven't seen it's not like a huge sample size still. So you got a whole year to sort of figure it out and then, try guys out in the offseason if you don't like what you saw from Tompkins.
And I agree with your viewpoint as far as how the Bucs are probably viewing this. As long as nobody's back there losing the game for us, Devin Tompkins doesn't muff 3 punts in a game, I think we should be okay because as of everything up until this point, he's been okay. Wanted to talk a little bit more about some other players on this Bucs team continuing to hit their stride as the season goes on, and a guy that has given us a lot of excitement so far this season with his redemption arc in Tampa Bay is quarterback Baker Mayfield. And I got to tell you, I like having a quarterback who is as candid in the media as Baker can be. He's not the most buttoned-up guy in the world. I mean, even Tom Brady, when he came through Tampa, was not the most buttoned-up guy in the world, which was kind of strange to see after 20 years of the Patriot way. So Baker Mayfield had a busy weekend. He was on College Game Day as a guest picker, Oklahoma and Texas, great game. And then he was on the Pat McAfee show, I think the day before, and did a good 35, 40-minute interview with them and really, really started talking about how his experience in Tampa Bay has treated him so far. And he compared it to his time in Oklahoma and the fact that, he's just having fun playing the game again. And obviously, up until this point, everything seems to be gelling pretty well with the offense. Seems like he's picking it up and playing the best football he has since he took the Browns to the playoffs a couple of years ago. So now that we have seen what Baker is capable of, and we look at how he's going to finish the rest of the season, I still think there's going to be, peaks and valleys, just like there is every NFL season. And I do think Baker is going to have that game that might turn some people off. I'm not saying it's going to be this week. I don't think it will. But eventually it will. It's going to maybe look like it did against the Eagles another week in a row. That's the best case scenario. If the Bucs go play an elite team, it's hard to call Buffalo an elite team after what happened against Jacksonville, but Buffalo's going to be a very tough test on a short week. That could be the game. But going back to Baker Mayfield, how you expect him to play the rest of the season, given all the variables up until this point, given that Dave Canales as a play caller is working out so far, Baker getting a full offseason, building camaraderie with his teammates, talking about having fun playing the game of football again, and just speaking so much to how these coaches in Tampa are letting him play to the best of his ability. How do you think Baker's going to finish this year out? I think realistically, I don't think it's unfair to think this could be one of the best seasons of his career.
No, I mean, right now it's shaping up to be the best season of his career. Like, that's probably what you're on track for. But he's been good. There's been obviously, and look, there's going to be plays, and just like you said, there's going to be more times this season where like fans are frustrated with him. Like, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. It's going to be the roller coaster, right? There's going to be times where you're like, yeah, like didn't play well, like in in the Philly game, like, yeah, didn't play that great, or and there's going to be times with the New Orleans game, like, wow, Baker was really good, and there's a few times like that. The Detroit game, tough defense coming up. Buffalo, like you said, on the road on a short week against, the Bills, with the Jacksonville thing, the Jaguars were already in London. The Bills had to travel to London. You can't tell me that's not an advantage. Like, that is a clear advantage when the Jaguars have already been there for a week.
2 weeks in a row in London is crazy, by the way. I think the
wild.
Jags the first team ever to do that.
Yeah, wild. I think the Bills were at a little bit of a disadvantage there. So I think they're a tough team. The Texans, feisty team. Even the Falcons are a feisty team here. Their defense has improved.
Just traded for Van Jefferson today.
Yeah. You still got the 49ers, who that's probably that's the toughest one you got on your schedule yet. That's looking like that could be an ugly one. Going on the road, West Coast, that's not easy. So I think there are going to be times where fans are going to be frustrated, but I think you have to realize, like, look, he's not perfect. He's not going to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL and be so great and this and that, but you don't need him to be. Like, you don't need him to be that guy if the defense continues to play the way that they have and the pieces around him can be good enough. I don't think you need him to be that. So I think, and he needs to realize that, right? He needs to realize to be the best version of himself, he doesn't have to go out and act like the number one overall pick. Like, that's in the past. You're not that guy. The Browns picked you there. The Bucs didn't, right? Like, you shouldn't have that expectation. I don't think many people do put that expectation on him, but there's going to be, just like you said, peaks and valleys in this thing. And I do think that throughout the year, there's going to be times after games where, like, yeah, he played well, but then there's also going to be the times where you're like, which will make the offseason discussion, a little bit more fun, because you're going to be, I don't think at the end of the year, you're going to be saying, oh, they definitely have to re-sign him, or, oh, they definitely are, no, you can't re-sign him. I think there's going to be a lot of split people, and there's going to be a lot of indecisiveness among the fan base and the analysts on, are you gonna re-sign him, or are you not gonna re-sign him? I don't think it's gonna be clear cut either way. So he struggled with consistency throughout his career. That's what I'm worried about. Hopefully, 13 straight games now, we're gonna get our answers here. I think these next 4 games or so are gonna tell you a lot about where this Bucs team is.
882 total passing yards for Baker up until this point of the season. 7 touchdowns through the air, 2 interceptions, and a passer rating of 101.5. Completion percentage of 69.6%. Nice numbers there for Bake. So, again, you like the way that he's playing. You hope he can continue to play well. And even on the weeks that the Bucs are not favored by much, you hope that it's a scenario like the Philly game where, again, he didn't play the best, But there were a couple of things that we had mentioned before. Mike Evans dropping some passes, a couple of miscues on offense, maybe a couple of overthrows, which I think you're still going to have every now and again. But as time goes on and he builds that consistency, I think even in the losses where, a game like Philly, it got out of hand, you come away from that and you're like, he still did what he could to protect the ball, had the one interception, didn't make many mistakes tonight, whatever the case may be. As long as the Bucs stay disciplined and Baker can stay composed in some games that the Bucs find themselves behind in, I think he's on pace to play one of his best seasons yet, and it's going to be exciting to see. Some other unsung heroes on this Buccaneers offense I wanted to highlight is the offensive line. I don't think we've given them enough praise, and I know it kind of sounds like, it's just a big gush fest here after the bye week, but I think it's just important we highlight.
They're 3-1.
They are 3-1, and I think it is
positive.
I think it's important to highlight what they've done well, and a lot of these things just aren't being talked about enough. We can talk about the right tackle, we can talk about the left tackle, we talk about Robert Hainsey at center, but Cody Mauch, his rookie season at right guard, he has been a blessing in disguise for the Bucs. Obviously, Luke Edeke going to be highlighted week after week. He's going to have another big week this week against Aiden Hutchinson for Detroit, playing a lot of premier pass rushers. Did a good job handling Cam Jordan against New Orleans week 4. And obviously Tristan Wirfs making that big jump to left tackle and still playing just as well as he ever did. But Cody Mauch has been great support on the right side of that offensive line. And even when the Bucs have been running the ball well, he's been a big part of as to why.
Yeah, I think he's had a really solid start, and it's a positive sign because, like the Bucs, like they had some hits with Ali Marpet and Alex Kappa, but like then they've struggled a little bit to find those consistent players there among the interior offensive line. And I think you can probably get close to crossing off right guard as a question mark. I think Cody Mauch has played really well, and I still think there are questions at center. Like I still have questions there long term. I don't think there is any question at left guard. I think they need a left guard, which obviously you're not going to find that during the season. Like that's an off season thing, and that's what this year's about. This year's about learning what you need for the future, and hopefully they don't need a right tackle. Hopefully Luke Gedeke can continue to be just a solid player. Look, I don't need my right tackle to be elite. Right tackles aren't as valuable as left tackles, right? So, and that's why like Tristan Wirfs being elite, great. Like I'd prefer an elite right tackle, but like it doesn't have to be a necessity. DeMar Dotson was a solid player for the Buccaneers for many years. If Luke Gedeke could be DeMar Dotson, that's perfect. Like there's nothing wrong with that. So, I don't really have many questions there. And then, Cody Mauch's answering a lot of the questions that I think a lot of Bucs fans had about him, about the draft pick there, and looking so far like a hit. It is early, but it does look like a hit there. And like I said, Hainsey, it's okay. Like I just don't know if he's a starter level guy. Like I just don't know. To me, he seems like first guy off your bench. Like that to me seems to be like his best role, can play both center and guard. I think that's probably where he's best suited, but we'll see. Still got the rest of the year, but I mean, we've seen enough sample size of him like at center, obviously all last year. So, you can't count on Ryan Jensen for the future. I wouldn't count on Ryan Jensen for the future. It is a positive development of Cody Mauch and Luke Gedeke, though. Like Luke Gedeke for sure, because they're two young guys who the Buccaneers are going to be relying on, especially after they're going to pay Tristan Wirfs what they're going to pay him. And, you're going to need Tristan Wirfs is going to be probably the highest paid left tackle in NFL history. You're going to need cheaper options around him. You can't pay. That's why they had to let go of Alex Kappa. You couldn't pay both Ryan Jensen and Alex Kappa. Right? You can't pay all 5 offensive linemen $10+ million. You just can't do it. So you need to have cheaper options, and that's where having Luke Gedeke still on his rookie contract, Cody Mauch just starting his rookie contract, that's going to be a huge benefit as the Buccaneers sign Tristan Wirfs to a big money deal. So I think, the development of both those guys, particularly Mauch, just like you said in the question, has been really perfect so far.
Yeah, speaking of development, let's talk about the tight end room. And we got a good question from our buddy Urek in chat. He brings up your thoughts on Cade Otton. And I will say so far this season, Cade Otton has been the tight end one for Tampa Bay. I mean, it's been him. Payne Durham, who barely plays at this point, and Keeft, who, aside from some targets early on in the season, hasn't been that much of a factor so far up until this season. I will say for Cade Otton, I still think I'm waiting for that big game where he breaks out and everybody's like, oh, there he is, because aside from the Chicago game, he had
a touchdown against New Orleans.
He had he had a touchdown against New Orleans, and against the Bears, he had 6 catches for 41 yards. So he has definitely showed up, and he definitely has the ability to make plays. And I think as a tight end one, he's been serviceable, but I don't think we have seen him reach that full capability. And I think we are yet to see that game where, again, he's going to break out. I don't know what game it's going to be, but I think there is going to be a game this year where he has over 65 yards and a touchdown, and maybe, one of those receptions is a big 20-yard play downfield and he winds up in the end zone. Something exciting like that. I do think that he has some steps left to take in his development, and he's doing that, but we haven't seen the doors open all the way for him so far this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of football left to be played, obviously, but I have been a tad disappointed in him. I've been a little surprised that they haven't utilized the tight ends as much. I thought the tight ends and the running backs were both going to get a lot of work in the passing game, and it just hasn't happened. Based on what I've seen so far, and again, 13 games left, a lot can happen. Based on what I've seen so far, wouldn't shock me if tight end is pretty high on the Bucs priority list in the offseason, finding a starting tight end, whether that's, investing a second or third round pick into one, or even a first round pick, depending on where they are. Brock Bowers probably not going to happen. I would guess he's going to be too high of a draft pick, so I wouldn't expect that. But I know that's the name everybody will point to when you think of draft, but just don't see that as a realistic possibility. But I just, again, it's sort of like the Hainsey thing. I kind of wonder if Cade Otton's a really good 2. Yeah, is he not? He's not a 1, and that's what I think we're finding out. To me, he could be a serviceable, really good 2. I just don't know if on a Super Bowl winning roster, is he your tight end 1? I don't know.
I mean, he's really young. He's incredibly young.
He is. And like I said, there's a lot of football left to be played, but just what I've seen, and honestly, when they drafted him, I was like, yeah, it's a pretty safe pick. Yeah. I was like, I think his ceiling is very limited, but I think his floor is very high. I don't think this is a player who's going to be out of the NFL in 4 years. But I also don't know, he has very, very little chance of becoming a star, or even a guy who say, oh yeah, he's really good. Don't think that. I think, like I said, his ceiling's low, but the floor's high. And I think right now you're kind of seeing that type of player. So if they choose, if they decide, hey, if they see what I see, basically, that he's more of a 2, wouldn't shock me if they went out and found a different starting tight end to pair with him. Because obviously, Payne Durham, what was he, a 6th round pick, or 5th round pick? Yeah, that's not stopping you. So, and also I want to address the running backs too, because not gonna lie,
you worried?
Kinda. I just, again, I wonder if the Bucs are finding out these answers. Cade Otton's a 2. Robert Hainsey might just be a guy that's best served a really good bench piece, really good depth. Is Rachaad White a 2? That's Sean Tucker looks like an undrafted free agent. It had a lot of hype. Looks like an undrafted free agent.
The honeymoon phase is over for a lot of these guys that people were hyping up before the regular season began, and even throughout the first couple of weeks, the Bucs have been winning games, and part of that is due to the run game. But even then, we've questioned it along the way, and a lot of people gave us some slack for it. But here we are, 5-6 weeks into the season, and we're asking ourselves these questions yet again, and it looks more relevant than ever right now.
Yeah, I just wonder if, Rachaad White's more of a complimentary guy and not the guy. So does that mean they need to go out and trade for somebody? And obviously, thank God that Colts signed Jonathan Taylor, so we can stop talking about that. No, I don't think it means that. But would it shock me if the Buccaneers are picking a running back fairly early in the draft? No, it wouldn't. So, again, a lot of games left. It's just what I've seen on those 3 players on the offensive side of the ball. Same goes for on the defense side, Logan Hall. Like, is Logan Hall more of just a guy? That's what this season is about. Like, and everybody said, oh, they're going to tank or they're going to make the playoffs, this and that. To me, like, this is going to sound strange, and I don't want to talk about this forever, but the wins and losses don't matter as much to me as the individual performance. It just doesn't.
Real team
now, obviously,
here.
They go out and 3-1 and they end the season 3-14 or whatever. Okay, that's a problem. But like the wins and losses don't matter to me because I don't have any clear expectations. And there's just you're finding out what you have. Right? To me, that's what this season is about. Finding out who can be on the 2024 and 2025 Buccaneers that you hope. And if the Bucs make the playoffs this year, great. Because you know why that's great? That gives you more answers. Oh, this guy, he can be on the 2024 Bucs. Luke Gedeke, he can be our starting right tackle for the next 3 years. We got that answer. Cade Otton, yeah, he's shown he can be the tight end one. Cross that off. And you're trying to figure that out. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, yeah, we don't need to bring another pass rusher. JTS has stepped up. That's what I think you're trying to find out this year. If you win, great. If you lose, I don't think it's the end of the world. And the Bucs are 3-1. They're clearly not getting a top 5 pick. Like, it's not happening. Most likely won't even get a top 10 pick. Top 15, possibly. Top 10, very unlikely. So I know it sounds weird to say that. I don't mean to ramble, but the wins and losses don't matter as much to me this year. It just don't.
Ramble away. I mean, that's what the whole reason we have a podcast is. But
yeah, I know. I like to hear myself talk. That's why I do this, actually.
I will say, I understand where you're coming from as far as this being a development year for the Bucs. Realistically, just seeing what they have and what kind of core they can continue to build moving forward, because this core group of players that we have talked about year in and year out since 2019. Maybe not all of those guys are going to continue to be in this core group of players in the years moving forward. So I totally get that perspective. And we talked about it even under the guise of like, hey, if the Bucs suck ass this year, maybe it's because of this reliance on younger depth. And it's because a lot of these players are going to have a longer leash because you're not in the Super Bowl window. You're not relying on veteran depth to step up and make sure that every you're not going to sign Julio Jones to play above Devin Tompkins. Right.
You're going to play Devin Tompkins.
I understand what you're saying, but when you start 3-1, I think the wins and losses do matter. Simply because we were going to transition into the trade deadline talk to wrap up the show, and we still will, but I want to make this point. For the Bucs being as young of a team as they are and the expectations that they have set for themselves, I've heard Todd Bowles, I've heard Baker Mayfield, I've heard some other players go and echo this on other podcasts and talk shows. Everybody in that locker room, they set the expectations for themselves. They knew what the media had said about them coming into this year, and they knew that a lot of people, Peter King has already flipped his pick on the Bucs because he said they would be one of the worst teams in the NFL.
Well,
which clearly
and
they
he
won't
didn't even give an explanation. Like, that's just terrible journalism.
Right? Yeah. No, it's bad. We've seen a lot of bad journalism be exposed because of how well the Bucs have played throughout the first month of the NFL season. But now that you start 3-1, now that you have a firm grasp on the NFC South, at least a half a game lead with a couple of teams winning this week, you look to another strong NFC matchup this week, and it's a game that if you win, the expectations get that much higher, and you start 4-1.
I'll give you that. If they beat the Lions and go 4-1, all right. Then
I think even with a 3-1 start, it changes the conversation of what they're going to do before the trade deadline, because we talked about it was a very slippery slope of games right around this time. After Philly, we knew that they were going to have New Orleans
on a short week.
And then you get the bye week, which is great, but you come out and you have Detroit, and you have a short week coming up against Buffalo. You've obviously got a division game against Atlanta. There's a lot of potentially losable games in there.
Yeah.
So I kind of get that.
Even we mentioned Houston has been feisty. CJ Stroud's been really good. Not a gimme. There's some games that you're like, oh, if one or two plays go this way, the Bucs could lose them.
But the Bucs have played well enough to where we're not even talking about, trading Mike Evans. You remember how the conversation was, oh, if the Bucs suck by this point, maybe the Bucs look to build this team forward.
And you know what? I think they could have. I
think they could have.
If they're 1-3 right now or 0-4, I think that's a real conversation. But
now that they know how well they can play and how they can hang with some of these better teams, I think that's just not even a thought in their mind, and they're going to go into every week thinking they can win. And I think with the NFC South being what it is, the Bucs know that they can win this division for another year in a row, and maybe not go on a super deep playoff run, but like you said, it's obviously a win-win when this team ends up in the playoffs. But if you end up in the playoffs, not only does it add legitimacy to Baker Mayfield as a quarterback playing a full season, Todd Bowles as a head coach, Dave Canales as an offensive coordinator, the rest of this Bucs roster, there's a lot of things happening that point towards the Bucs just continuing to be a team that a lot of people are, I don't want to say going to sleep on, but more people are going to be excited to talk about week in and week out when they continue to surprise a lot of these teams in the NFL. Like, this is a good roster, and we talked about that even on the season prediction show where I picked them to win 8 games and you picked them to win maybe less. But we said time and time again, this is a good roster and it's a good core group of players. And if everything goes right, I think they're going to be a good team. And so far, a lot of things have gone right, and they look like a good team.
Yeah, no, they play the part. You want to see it against better competition. I think they hung in there with Philly, but you could tell, even through throughout the entire game, though, you're like, yeah, this talent gap's pretty wide. Philly's better, and Detroit right now is one of the hottest teams in the NFL. Went into the Chiefs, defending champs, Super Bowl ceremony night, and beat them. That's something to be said about that. And they just dismantled Carolina, which, how would you like to be a Panthers fan? I mean, you traded Caleb Williams and DJ Moore for Bryce Young. That's brutal. That is just, awful. But yeah, I do look, they're 3-1. You got 5 division games left. Say you go 3-2 in those division games. Okay. That's 4-2 in the division. That's 6 wins right there. Let's say they go 3-2. That's 6 wins. All right. Then you got Texans might be a win. Titans might be a win. Maybe Colts, Packers, right? Like you have those games there. Okay. You're talking, even if you go 3-2 in the division still and then win some of those other games, you're still talking 8, 9, maybe 10 wins. I would say 10 wins is probably the max. But it's not impossible. And just like you said, it's because of their, it is their core. They're not a very deep team. So that's another reason why the health, when we talk about health so much, is, I said, if one thing can derail it, it's health. And because they are not a deep team at all. I think they're actually one of the more shallow teams in the NFL, possibly a team with some of the worst depth in the NFL. I just don't think, there's maybe not worst, inexperienced, a lot of unknown, I should say. But
murky waters beyond.
Yeah, just the unknown. You don't know. So, I do think that if they stay healthy, and that is obviously a big key, right? They so far have passed the test, right? There's been a few iffy, spots, but so far they've passed the test. But if they stay healthy, I fully expect them to be right in the middle of this thing. And honestly, I think the month of December is going to be pretty interesting, because I just think this is going to be a 3-team race for the NFC South. And I don't think the NFC South, they might send 2 to the playoffs. I don't think they're sending 3. So I think the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season is going to be really interesting, because I think all 3, Tampa, New Orleans, and Atlanta, all going to have pretty similar records this year.
Yeah, I agree. I really think the NFC South is going to be competitive down the stretch, and it's going to be, even with the Bucs, let's say, projected only win 9 or 10 games, I think that division race comes down to the bitter end, and it's going to be, whoever has the best division record when it's all said and done, which is very attainable for the Bucs. Our buddy G Vegas, the moderator, holding it down in chat, brings up a good point. He says, looking at the dysfunction of the Panthers and Carr being a saint for another year, I think the Bucs can win the division this year and next. He also brings up Buffalo looking weak with their injuries. So all things to consider.
There is a lot of injuries there, but it's a short week on the road. Also, little bit of a note there. Did you know that when they go to Buffalo week 8, that's the first AFC team they're going to play all year?
AFC
they haven't played. They haven't played an AFC team,
and the AFC obviously an absolute powerhouse.
They haven't played an AFC team at all. Vikings, Bears, Eagles, Saints, Lions, Falcons. First 6 games are all NFC.
I like it. Keep it in the conference. Keep it clean. So let's wrap things up. I wanted to talk about also last call for phone calls if anyone wants to get it in. 305-224-1968. The meeting ID for this week is on your screen. 878-4591-9335. I've seen it brought up in chat a few times, and it's going to be a talking point over the next few weeks, especially if the Bucs maybe drop a game here over the next few weeks as well. Are the Bucs going to be active before the trade deadline? The NFL trade deadline on Halloween this year, 3 weeks from today. So the Bucs have 3 weeks to figure out if they want some reinforcements, what they're going to give up to get those reinforcements, and ultimately where those reinforcements are going to be. Up until this point, we've covered some different position groups that are going to look thin, and that's a lot of them, but the position groups that aren't necessarily a sure thing, like tight end, like running back, like depth along, the linebacker core, or even depth in that secondary where there's a lot of unproven roster space being taken up. What do you think about the Bucs as the trade deadline approaches here?
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if they did anything. Looking at spot rack right now, the Bucs are 25th in the NFL in cap space with $3.4 million available. Not a lot of money, and plus, dude, Jason Light loves the draft. Like, I just don't think they're in a position to give away any draft capital. They actually already gave away some 2024 draft capital when they traded up to go get Trey Palmer. So they've already given away some draft capital for next year. I just don't think they're going to be doing. I don't think they're going to be selling. But I also would be shocked. I shouldn't say shocked. I'd be shocked if they sold. Unless these next 2 games are just the worst ever. Then who knows? But I would be pretty surprised if the Buccaneers bought anything. Just it doesn't feel. The NFL trade deadline is easily of the 3 major sports, easily the worst. Like, just nothing happens. So I don't know really how active every team is going to be. You've seen some minor trades now leading up to it, but I don't think the Buccaneers are going to be in on anything. I really don't. Selling or buying just doesn't seem like the right time right now.
I agree. I mean, we just spent a good 10 minutes talking about how this is a development year for the Bucs and how even though they are spread thin at some positions and the depth isn't what it used to be, it's still a year to rely on those players, and that's a whole reason why I think they're going to be hesitant to do really much of anything at the trade deadline. So, like you said, usually anticlimactic around this time of year, and people love to get worked up about potential possibilities because every now and again you do get that big trade. Or you get a player who hasn't been signed yet, making a signing with the team finally, a big name free agent that's been sitting around. So people are going to be looking for headlines anytime they can. And I think as far as the trade deadline goes, we're going to see some of that. But don't expect very much from the Bucs. We do have our first call of the night, though, from the 813. Hello, who's this?
Hey, fellas, it's Jeremy calling again.
Jeremy,
hey,
what's
Jeremy.
up, dude?
Not much, man. That weekend was rough, man. That was a rough weekend. No Buccaneer football. So glad we got that out of the way now. I'm ready for some Buccaneer football. But anyway, there is one that I do want to say to Evan, and please answer me this. Why Atlanta? What's so special about them? Like, between Fox, and you kind of mentioned about Atlanta. What's up with that, bro? I don't see Atlanta as a threat, man. Raiders not that good to me, truthfully.
Well, I mean, yeah, Ritter has disappointed a little bit. My thing with Atlanta is, one, I think they are pretty well coached. Now, I think the Bucs roster is probably more talented, but I do think they're pretty well coached. I think they can run the ball. I mean, Bijan's a special player. I think Drake London is pretty good, and they've added pieces on their defense. If I had to guess, I would say the bigger threat for this year is probably New Orleans. Just because the troubles that the Bucs have had against the Saints, even though they've beaten them, and I do think that the talent, the Saints are closer to the Bucs than the Falcons are. But I mean, Jesse Bates has been a really good pickup for them. Grady Jarrett's a good player. They've got a lot of talent. AJ Terrell, I think, is one of the more underrated corners in the NFL. I understand people's hesitant nature with Atlanta. Like I get it, and I do think that Ritter will probably be the reason that they don't make the playoffs. And I think they're going to have to face a lot of tough questions on the offseason about that. But that's the main reasons. Honestly, I just think they're not a great team, but I think they're more improved than people wanted to acknowledge, I think, in the offseason, because I just really liked what they did in free agency to shore up their defense pair Jesse Bates with AJ Terrell there. And I think they got a lot of good things going for them. Their offensive line has improved as well. So I really do like what they have. Obviously, Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is a good player. They just don't use him a ton.
No. Listen, I was a Kyle Pitts truther 2 years ago, and I still want to believe in the guy, but as long as he's Atlanta, he looks like O.J. Howard 2.0 out there.
Dude, you know what? I mentioned Brock Bowers earlier. Brock Bowers, if the Buccaneers are picking at like 18, Brock Bowers might be there, because I don't know if any team is going to pick a tight end in the top 5 ever again. I just don't know if it's going to happen. So, yeah, that's the main reason. I do appreciate the question, and I'm thankful that that sparked your interest, and I'm able to explain that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the Falcons have an interesting roster, and I think they could pose some issues for the Buccaneers, because the Buccaneers' run defense has been okay, but against teams that like to run the ball and do it effectively, sometimes the Bucs have struggled. So I could see Atlanta giving the Bucs a few competitive games here.
Yeah, I think Atlanta is built in a way, kind of like Evan said, where they have the pieces. You have talent. I hate to lump Kyle Pitts in there, but we can go ahead and make him a part of the conversation. Bijan Robinson, as well as the pieces on defense. But where they come up short, I mean, they really come up short. Obviously Ritter isn't looking like he's going to be the guy long-term for Atlanta at the quarterback position, and he may lose them some more games this year because he's already done that so far. Kyle Pitts, I still believe that he needs a change of scenery, but not sure what his deal is. He was falling down on routes and slipping around the field last week, so not a great look for him up until this point. But they got to get it figured out, and they got to get it dialed in at some positions. But I kind of agree with what you were saying and what some other people in chat are saying, and I definitely don't think Atlanta's going to be a threat down the stretch this year as the NFC South gets more competitive.
I could see it next year. If they add a few more pieces, I could see it. I do appreciate the question though, Jeremy.
No, I'm not trying to question him. I promise, man. I respect you very much, man, what you do. Like I said, I was just wondering when you mentioned Atlanta, because Fox mentioned Atlanta over us to win the division. I don't know if you saw that on social media, and I was kind of questioning it. I'm like, why is everybody keep freaking doubting us? Why are they keep putting teams like Atlanta, Carolina, they finally recognize because they're the worst team in football, in my opinion. But, however, Atlanta, like I said, I do agree with your opinion. Like I said, I think they're a quarterback and maybe a player away from being a division contenders. But I just don't see them better than the Bucs or the Saints when it comes to the division. To me, they're number 3. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, a little bit crazy. A little bit crazy to me. Those odds came out, and like the live odds right now to win the NFC South, I think the Bucs are 3rd in the odds, but they're 1st in the actual South. It's very, very strange.
Let them keep doing that. I mean, it's just
take the bet, guys. Like if you want to take the bet, it's plus money. Take the bet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a good time while the NFL media still sleeps on the Bucs. Jeremy, any final thoughts before we let you go, my friend?
I mean, I think we're going to have a fun game to watch on Sunday. I'm going to try my best to make it there. I'm still working my way on getting tickets, so hopefully I'll make it last minute. I got my creamsicle ready in the closet, Mike Evans, and like I said, I mean, I think we can pull this game out. The team stays healthy, everybody stays healthy and ready to go, and most of all, the one play I'm looking forward to watching on Sunday is Kalijah Kancey. I think this guy's a missing piece from really getting pressure on the quarterback to where we're not going to be thrown all over in the secondary. So at the end of the day, I see us coming out with a close victory over the Lions by a field goal, and we go 4-1, fellas. What do you think?
Yeah, that would be a pretty big statement. They're able to go to 4-1, beat a Lions team who the media is talking about now. Obviously, game got flexed to 425. Going to be more national eyes on it. I think if you're looking for the whole script to completely flip, I think from a national media perspective, it's flipped a little bit. Like, people don't think the Bucs are the worst team in the NFL anymore. But like, if you want to talk about people and the media talking about the Bucs being good, a win against the Lions would go a very, very, very long way.
Yeah, I think they're going to bring it. I think it's going to be a tough game. I think the Bucs are going to continue to surprise people throughout the season. Win, lose, or draw this Sunday.
I don't want to do any predictions because the Bucs have injury concerns. The Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs both missed the game. They have injury concerns, so got to keep an eye on the injury report. We'll have predictions for you guys the Friday preview, though.
Yeah, I won't drop any score predictions, but I think it's going to be a good game. And I'm in the same boat as you, Jeremy, as far as getting tickets. I think if my Thursday Night Football prize picks hit this week, then I'm definitely going to buy myself a pretty good ticket and make my way out there. I had some good luck on Monday night, so excited for that. But Jeremy, good talking to you, my friend. Excited for a good game this week.
Oh, likewise, man. Thanks for having me on, man. Take care, man. Go Bucs.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. Jeremy. Go Bucs. Well, I think, ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I think we covered everything we wanted to. Brought you.
Yeah, and I think we did a good job of not doing the game preview.
Yeah,
I think that's what I tried to avoid, because I do think there's so many injuries on both sides of the ball. It's going to matter. So, we will have a game preview out for you guys later on this week, maybe with some special guests. Not going to throw anything out there concrete yet, but maybe with some special guests here. So, keep an eye on that. And, like I said, there's just too tough for me to do a score prediction. I know people are going to want it, but I can't. It matters if Amon-Ra St. Brown plays, or if Mike Evans plays, or Jamel Dean plays, or Jahmyr Gibbs. That stuff matters. So I can't quite give a score prediction yet, but hopefully by Friday we'll have a more clear picture on who's in, who's out.
Yeah, a lot of variables between now and then. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneers news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What have you got this week?
Going to be doing the Q&A again. We're back with that. So after the bye week, back with the Q&As, the weekly Q&As, and also going to have an X Factor out for this week. So the bye week, I decided not to write anything, just sort of took the bye week off. Now we're back to it. So keep an eye on BucsNation.com for all that stuff.
Last but not least, you can find myself on Instagram and Twitter at Rhetticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And feel free to tweet me anytime. I mean, I know that that's not a word anymore because it's X now.
Feel free to X me.
Feel free to post at me. Feel free to write a post at me.
Yeah, feel free to X me. Kind of sounds
tag
me
wrong.
In
a post and I'll repost it, and you can put it up on the post.
Yeah. You can't retweet anything. That's not a thing.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. That's
you can the dumbest thing. The dumbest thing that freaking Elon's done. Why are we not putting headlines for articles anymore? Why is it just a picture? That's so stupid.
Well, people don't like reading headlines. They just like the picture. They just want to click on the picture, Evan.
It's pointless. Literally, I've scrolled past so many stories because I'm like, oh, it's the picture. I'm like, oh, wait, no, I can click on this.
You want to see something funny, actually? So I have yet to update my app. I turned off auto updates for Twitter about a year ago, and I have updated at my discretion. So I still have the bird. I still have a lot of the functions that old Twitter had. It still says Twitter when I open it up. It's still Twitter in my phone. I don't have that nasty X contaminating my home screen. So I'm good. I'm great. I will continue to call it Twitter until it is officially because I'm going to be honest with you. I think, and we'll wrap up with this, I think it's going to be Twitter one day.
This is an interesting way to wrap up a show.
I know. This is a turn I didn't think we would take this week, but Appreciate the people who are still here sticking around. I think it'll be Twitter before you know it again. I think this time 2 years from now, it'll be Twitter and X will be.
What you think Elon's going to still own it, or he's going to sell it to somebody else?
I think he'll probably sell it to someone else. And they'll change the name back.
Too much of a headache.
Oh God, yeah, not a great direction so far. But looking forward to a good game between the Bucs and Lions on Sunday. We'll talk to you guys later this week with our week 6 game preview. As we get ready for the return of the Creamsicles. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. Thank you guys again for hanging out with us live on YouTube this week. We'll talk to you later. Until then, and as always, thanks for listening, and go Bucs.